Everyone able to view my code editor as well as this web browser on which I've rendered the particular code? Perfect. Okay. So let's have a very quick recap what we did last time. So we did form and form elements. We covered a few of them and rest we would be covering today. So the major part to note over here is that every form element that we have covered so far consists of two main things. If we focus on this code part, let me go to the very first one, this one, name, this name, username. It consists of two main things, the label and input. What is the label? Label is something that we have written over here. This is what label is rendering. It is providing the information about the input type, what it is. We can write it anything. And the input refers to this particular text area, this particular area where we can enter some details or we can send some details from our side to the server. And then server would authenticate and try to make sure everything received is correct and provide the required information. And inside input, all these input types that we have started, they differ on one level. That is this type attribute. If you make it text, it would be a simple text attribute. If you make it like password, where is it? Let's say email, this one, we have at the very end. If you make it password, okay, this one, then when you enter something, it would be hidden. So the major difference so far is the type attribute. If you mark it email, it provides self like browser provided checks. For instance, I write some email over here and I write .com. And then if I try to submit, it would tell me that it must include @ because an email is by default having an @ in syntax. Now this age comes from type number. It provides us this particular this increment decrement arrows. We can increase by 5. We have set by 5 from the minimum attribute. If we go to age, this one, sorry, step from the step attribute, we have set it to increase it by 5. So every time it's increasing by 5 and minimum value is 1. So that user cannot enter any negative values in age column. Similarly, this is date picker. It comes from the type date. So what I'm trying to tell you over here is every input element that we have studied so far differs on the type attribute. The major difference is in these two. These are your checkboxes. You can select multiple, but in radio buttons, in these radio buttons, you can select only one. How does this happen? Because in these two, the attribute, the name attribute in your checkboxes differ. They are the name attribute in your checkbox is specific to the value type, whereas name attribute in your radio buttons are same. I've assigned it as contact. So name attribute tells if one particular value from a radio button is selected from this category, from contact category, and whenever we select the other one, the previous one would be disabled and new one would be selected. And to provide the value, we use this value attribute. The value is sent to the server. For instance, if I'll just increase the size of this little bit, I'll mark anything as of now. And let's say @Gmail, and I'm entering minimum required details. And if I submit, okay, I need to fill this one. See, every information is coming over here. Every information is coming in our URL. Name, first is the user. That is coming from here, this particular user, then email, age, and everything goes to your URL as well as URL parameters. If you we just go ahead, this email value is coming, then age value is coming. Moving ahead, your date is coming, soccer is on, tennis is on, contact, we have selected email, password, we have entered something. That is coming in URL, and this URL parameters are being sent to the server, and server fetch out the details. And that is happening because of one major thing, that is get request that we are sending over here. Through this method get, this URL is able to catch the parameters that we have submitted, and those are sent to the server. So this was a quick recap that every input element that we have studied so far differs on one attribute, that is type attribute. Any questions in this? Okay. So shall we move ahead with the new topic, the one that we would be covering today, the other form elements? Let's move on to those ones. So the next form element that I want to tell you is not an input type. It is called select element. It is used for drop down menus. Like you have an option to select one out of three from a drop down menu. Let's see how to create one. We'll follow the same procedure. We'll create a div. Inside div, we would be putting our particular input element, because input elements are inline elements. They only take enough space that is required for them, and they get stacked next to each other instead on one above the each other. So that's why we are putting everything in div. Div is your block level element. So I'll just go over here. I'll remove this one and let me put another div. This div, I'll just mark it. I'm putting it for my select element. Let's do. So now in this div, what I want to do is same procedure, label. Now label, let's say I want to have a list of vehicles from which I want to choose. I want user to select which vehicle they are driving these days. So I'll simply write vehicle type. This would just be, if I save this one, simple text. Simple text comes over here, vehicle type. Now to create a particular drop-down menu, we have select tag. We simply write select tag. In this select, we know what this name is for, what this ID is for. Name should always be very consistent. Always use the one you're using in ID. I prefer that because name goes to the server. The value that we see over here comes from the name. So let's write it. Name as vehicle, and ID I'm also putting it as vehicle. So why this for and ID are same? If I click on this one, the input element, the select element associated with this one would be highlighted. So inside the select tag, what do? Now we mention different options that we want to have in our drop-down menu. So for that, we have the option tag. So I'll simply write option. In this option tag, whatever you'll write over here. So let's say I write car. So if I hit save, you see this drop down has been selected. And if I've selected car, if I submit, just see right now the vehicle is not submitting any value. Why? Because the value needs to be submitted over here. This particular text refers to only the text that would appear over here, and the one that we want to send should be written over here. So if I write car over here, and now if I hit save, and now if I just write some password and submit, the value car goes over here. That is coming from this value attribute. The value attribute in your options tag is sending the selected option to the server. Now we can have multiple options because it is a drop-down menu. I'll just go back to the form and we can have multiple options. For instance, we can have bike. Now there are certain ways that if you do not want to mention car or bike like this, what can you do? If you do not want to mention text in between option tag, you can write label tag inside over here as well. For this options tag, you can have label tag and let's say bike, and I'll write value and let's say bike. Now, if I hit save, I would get bike over here. Now, bike is not coming from any text in between. It is coming from this label tag. So there are multiple ways to write option tag. You can select any one. I prefer this one because this is more readable. What option value we are having? This is car and this is the other way. I'll keep it this way just to have a reference how we can write multiple. We have multiple ways to write option tag. So any doubts in this one? So now if we see, like if I write the password, why do I have to write password every time? Just a quick recap, because we have mentioned this required attribute. That's why before sending this form, I always need to mention the password. So if I try to submit like this, it would tell me, please fill out this field. It is coming from this required attribute. So that's why I have to mention every time. So now I'm selecting bike and I submit. It's working perfectly fine, nothing wrong. But what if I want to select multiple options? Right now, I'm only able to select one out of two, either car or bike. But if I want to select multiple options, there is another attribute. In your select tag, you just go to your select tag and write multiple. So I'll write multiple. So simple multiple attribute, and you would get an options like this. Which one do you want to pick? Now, if you select this one, press your control key, and then select the other one, and you'll get both the options. Then I can write password and submit. You see, I'm getting vehicle as car and vehicle as bike. So if your select tag or if your drop-down menu need to have multiple options to be selected at one time, you can do it with this multiple attribute. So mostly we use it for single options, but it can be used for multiple options as well. So any doubts in this options tag? Any doubts in this select tag? This one, this drop-down menu. So if I remove the, yes.
Rahul, yeah, if this is a drop down, right? If within that, can we have the option of, selecting it via maybe a radio button or any other source?
So like over here, if we want to put radio button inside this.
Yeah.
So let's try that. Let's see if it works. So if I just put another one, I'll just mark it as truck, and I want to put it through my radio button. I'll just remove this label, and inside this, I'll simply write a label for the truck for my and input as radio. Okay. And let's have the name and ID. Name. Truck. So let's see. So now we are getting this vehicle type with bike not being a part of our options tag. So I think we would face some issues over here. Like if I try this one, the bike is not getting selected inside this. So if I try to submit this, let's try. So we are getting the truck option. The truck is on as well. We are getting this particular one. We are getting the vehicle as truck from the options tag. But I'm seeing we are facing some issues with the bike option, right? If I try to put it like this and see. So we are not able to get the bike one. So let's see if we do it like this.
Yeah, I was thinking that, in front of, for instance, why it's selecting it multiple, right? So I think there should be another way.
So if we want to select multiple options, you can go for the checkbox. So like over here, we can select multiple options. So checkbox were designed to get multiple options. And if you want to have a drop-down menu with single or multiple options, we have the options tag. Otherwise, for single options, we can use only radio buttons as well. So radio buttons, like if I have to say, they are like for opposite values mostly, like single values, like select your gender or are you graduate? Yes or no? Which one do you prefer? This one or this one? The complementary options, if we have to put in our form, then we use radio buttons. And when we want to have multiple options, we use checkboxes. And when we want to have a drop-down menu, we have this options tag. So I won't prefer this one to be mixed inside this because we have separate functionality for each of them. So I'll just comment this out and get back to our normal, right? This one. So I'm removing this multiple one as of now. Let me comment that out. Okay, don't comment everything. So let's remove this one. Yeah. So we are having this multiple options that we can put inside our options tag, and you can select one out of two. So if you don't want the first value to be displayed like this, you can have an empty options tag also. Like an empty option tag would give you just simple empty option tag, or you can write select your value, select your vehicle type. If I write this, then you can select one. And if I choose this one, this would not be submitted to the server because I've not written the value type. Because I've not written this value inside this, we are getting this is this particular one, but this is not submitted to the server because server would get the value from here. So this is just like if you want to put optional text in your drop down menu, you can do it with this. So like just to give an idea what to the user what this particular drop down menu is about. So to add large list, we have to follow this syntax, this options tag. If you want to put a list inside this, we have to follow this syntax. Every time you have to write options tag inside, because if I'll just remove this one, just see, we have only one line of code for each value. We have only one line of code, this options tag. That's it. This select tag is the wrapper tag in which the vehicle categories have been put. So these different categories have been put. Now, the next interesting input that we have to look at is actually the file input. Let's see a file input. This type of input helps you choose a file from your computer and upload it on a website. For instance, when you're applying to some job applications and on their website, they have this option, upload your resume or upload your documents. Then this type of input is used. So let me show you. So how do we write it? Simply we'll write it dev. This is just to separate it from other inputs. Same way label. Let's write it file. And for file we'll writing upload file, simple. And input tag. And this input tag will have the type file, name, let's say file, and ID file. So if I hit save, I'm getting this upload file and this button automatically. Right now it shows no file chosen. So if I click on this one, I would be taken to my local storage and I can select anyone. For instance, let me go to some downloads and let's say, okay, I have this wallpaper, this Ferrari wallpaper. If I open this one, just see this Ferrari wallpaper comes over here. Earlier, it was no file chosen. Now it shows that this particular wallpaper, this particular file has been chosen. So if I'll select again, let's say this one. Yeah. So you see this Ferrari wallpaper comes over here. And if I just submit, this one would come that Ferrari wallpaper file has been sent. So this was very important input that every websites are putting on their layouts so that user can upload something if they need. Now, most of the times the files that we are sending are of larger size. We want to make it work properly. Like for this, we instruct this input to send these files in multiple small packets. I hope you remember we have started in transmission control protocol TCP that we are sending information in packets because files are sometimes very large. And if at instance your connection gets broken with the server, then entire file needs to be sent again. To avoid this, we are sending in small packets. To do this, we have a separate attribute that is called your ENC type. So that attribute is mentioned in your form, very important attribute in your form tag, where is it? This one. In your form tag, we mention another attribute that is ENC type. Now this, let me just go back and we can read what this ENC type is. Now, the ENC type, it tells you that this attribute is used to submit the form to the server. Possible values are this. Okay, not much information. So let me help you with it. So ENC type, what it does, we have multiple attributes for this. So if I just write this, you see we have these three options. And the one that we select is this multi-part form data. It instructs that every file that is very large and can't be sent at once will be sent in multiple paths. From the name, we can very easily make out multi-part. It is breaking file into multiple parts. It tells the server that we are sending our data into multiple sections so that server can look for all the parts if they are received or not. If certain part is not received, then server would only request that part. You remember in transmission control protocol, every packet is numbered. And from that particular number, server detects, okay, all the number of packets have been received or not. Now, this allows us to submit our files to the servers very easily. So very important attribute. Always remember, if you are creating this file input type, mention this enc type attribute in your form section. It must be mentioned in your form tag, form opening tag, enc multipart. Instructs the server that we are sending a file in multiple paths, and server will check if all the paths have been received or not. So how does this help? In case a connection gets broken, then only the missing paths are requested, not the entire file again. So this was one of the very useful input types. The next one I want to tell you is, like, so far we have been using only single line user inputs where we do not have much to provide. Now, if we want to have like multiple lines of data, how can we do that? For that multiple lines of data, we have an input called text area. Let's create a text area where user can write his or her bio or some details about themselves. So let's go back to our this section. Let's say up, yeah, over here we'll create another input tag which is called your text area. Let's write it as bio. And this here type is here, the input is not called the input, it's called the text area itself.
Vale.
Text area. You see, we are getting so many columns and rows automatically. I'll tell you what this is. So let's write the name as bio and ID as bio as well. So if I hit save, automatically a text area comes, and the right now height and width is coming from this number of columns and rows. So if I remove this one, so a very generic text area comes, which we can increase or decrease as well. We can increase and decrease as per our need, or we can specify the number of columns like 30 and 10, or if we just write, let's say 20 rows. So automatically the text area has been increasing its width and height. So rows, with the rows, these are rows, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So it increases the height. With columns, it increases the width. So if I just write 10, let's see. Yeah, you see this one. So right now I'm just putting it, I'm just remove, let's have 5, very small one. Let's have 30 and let's have 10 on. A simple text area where we can write anything. We can have multiple lines and so on. Now, if you want to have some pre-written text over here, then how to do it? You can write it over here, like write something about yourself. If I hit save, you see this, write something about yourself, which user can delete and then write, or by default, if we reset our page, it would come. Now, there is a catch that if you put some spaces over here or lines over here in your text area, those would be reflected. So if I just hit save, you see these are reflected. So whenever you're creating your text area, always make sure there are no spaces, no lines in your text, as well as the input, these text area tags. Right now, you see this right starts from where my opening tag ends, and this closing tag is placed right next to the text when it ends, the pre-written text. So if I hit save, it would come over here. So always make sure there are no extra spaces in your text. There are no extra lines as well. So very useful, like you have your Twitter feeds, or when you post some comments. So if I write something like, let's say I write, this is my first comment. And oh, sorry. And I'll mention some password and I'll submit. So you see this bio is coming. This is my first comment. It is getting submitted. So if I write some random text, let's say anything, and if I submit, So the entire text area comes like this entire from the bio. So it's a nice to have a place where a user can write multiple lines, like mostly for your blog sites or your or Twitter feeds or your Facebook comments. You have these text areas. So the next one is the phone input. This input is used. Yeah.
Rahul, one thing that I think most of our participants might be worried about when you created the text area. So the attributes, name, ID, columns, and rows were automatically generated, right?
Yeah.
And then we had, custom changes into the columns and rows. Here, things get a little bit complicated for us in terms of understanding that, is it a must whenever we have a text area, it must contain the name. It should have an ID. Why is that ID required? And in the columns and rows. If you can explain these, because most of our participants still have confusion with regard to these attributes for all of them, for most of them. So
Definitely.
if you can, yeah.
So yeah. So let me do one thing. I'll remove these ones. So let's have a very simple label and text area, no attribute. Okay. So if I hit save, you see this is coming simple bio and this. Now, if I'm clicking on this bio, nothing is happening. Nothing is getting highlighted. So for instance, if I'm clicking on this password, you see this password box is getting highlighted. If I'm clicking on this email box is getting highlighted. If I'm clicking on this birth date, this is getting highlighted. So similarly, if I'll click on this one, yeah, this is getting highlighted. But in case of bio, nothing is getting highlighted. Why? To make this work, we have to connect our label, this label, as well as this input tag, which is text area in this case. How do we do that? For that, in label, we have this for attribute, which tells this label is for which particular input. We know this bio is for this text area. Now let's name it anything. Let's name it, let's say text box. This is for a text box. Now, in order to link this label with this text area, there is another attribute called ID. And if the value mentioned for the for attribute and ID attribute matches, then whenever we would click on this label, the respective attribute would be highlighted. For instance, if I write text box over here, and if I hit save, now see the difference. If I click on this one, this box is getting highlighted. This is only because these two values are same. For has some value, and if the ID has some value, then it would capture that value. Now, if I have another text box over here, let's say I have another text area, and let's remove the automatically coming values, and I write ID and write text box over here as well. Now, by default, when we started this ID attribute must be 1. So if I hit save, now I have two attributes. Now, if I click this one, only this one is getting highlighted. This one is ignored because the moment this label is clicked, it would check, is there any value that ID is holding which matches with the for attribute? And the first one it catches over here. The next one is being ignored. That's why always have one ID for one element. For instance, if you want to have an attribute for this one, have another label for another text box. So if I write, let's say label, and let's write as Twitter feed. And I'll write over here Twitter. Now let's mention this one as so. Just see. Now, if I'm clicking on this one, nothing is happening. Anyone would like to just tell me why nothing is happening? Because I have the for attribute, I have the ID attribute for this as well, but nothing is happening over here. But if I click bio, this particular box is getting highlighted. This one, you see this black one, but if I click on Twitter feed, nothing is happening. It's because the label, the for attribute of Twitter does not match with any ID attribute of the text area. So if I remove this ID from text box to Twitter, and if I hit save, now if I click on Twitter feed, the respective element would be highlighted. And we have used it in every input tag so far. That's correct. ID is used for CSS design. That is one property that ID helps us achieve. That is one functionality. IDs are used while form submission as well. If you want to catch some value, IDs are used while DOM manipulations. What is DOM manipulation? When through JavaScript, if we want to manipulate our page, at that time IDs are used. So IDs have multiple functionalities. One is for CSS design. The other one is when you're creating a form and you want to link a label to particular input or particular form element, then IDs are used. So if we just go over here, let's pick another one. Let's say password only. Just see this password attribute, this one. Focus on only this one. This is a simple label. Now we use the other way of writing password if you remember. Let's go to the simple one, the name over here. A simple name, it has a label, that name, for attribute, and any element that matches the for attribute of this label would be highlighted on clicking that label. For instance, let me mess this ID. Let me write anything. Now, instead of this ID email, I will write name over here. Now see, now this ID is name and for attribute is over here. Two different elements. This is my name attribute and this is my email attribute. But the ID of email input tag matches with the label of this one. Now what happens if I say, when I'll click this one, instead of this box getting highlighted, the email box would be highlighted. Just see, the email box is getting highlighted. Now if I click email one, nothing is getting highlighted. Nothing. So you see this one. So why this is happening? This is only because we'll just correct this one. We'll go back to email and we'll change our this one as well. So that's when for and ID comes. So are we able to understand what for and ID are doing? For is an attribute of label and the value that matches with the for attribute, if any element whose ID is having same value, then on clicking that particular label, the respective form element would be highlighted. So over here, we saw these two these two text boxes. Like this one is for Twitter feed. I'm only able to highlight this because the for attribute of my Twitter feed matches with the text area whose ID has the same value, this Twitter and this Twitter. Over here, we have text box bio, and this text box and this one is same. If I mess this up, now if I click, nothing would come up, nothing. So Khan is asking that we have why we should use ID once in class multiple times. So that is one part in CSS, and over here also, if you see, I have two IDs. For instance, I'll mark it as text box and I'll mark ID over here this text box only. So if I'm using ID twice, then ideally, if I click this label, this bio label, both my text areas should be highlighted, this one and this one, because they have same ID, right? They have same ID. So if I click on bio, only this one is getting highlighted, this one is not getting highlighted. That's because our code grows from top to bottom. Whenever our browser is reading our code, it goes from top to bottom. Moment it encounters the first value, the first match, it assigns it to that one. So that's why always use ID once. So if you want to have design, if you want to design your page, at that time, we have IDs and classes. So classes are used to when you want to design multiple paragraphs, multiple headings on your page. ID is used when you want to design particular element. So two things have been provided to us. If you uniquely want to target an element, use an ID. If you want to target group of elements, use a class. So that's why we use ID once. ID can be used twice, but it does not fulfill our functionality over here.
Yeah, Rahul, the complexity arises where with how we know that, in the input we need an attribute type, for instance, we need an attribute name file, and whether we need an ID for every single input. So this is where the concern comes. Like if you go back mm, to the previous, the bio, the labels, the input, the text area we had, and now just go generate a new text area, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the moment you
Yeah.
enter, right click. Yeah, so the complexity comes here, like name, right?
hmm So
how
let me
how
help
how
you.
it
There like basic. There are few things that we always need to take care. Is this visible, guys? This one, this comment area.
Yeah,
Few things, basic things that we always need. Number one is syntax. Now let's come to syntax. We have simple opening and closing tag, right? Now in this tag, we can use multiple things. We are right now considering only form and form elements. So syntax has two things. Form and form elements has two things that we need to remember. One is your label, and the other one is your form element type. It could be input, or it could be your, let's say, text area, anything. Now there are some mandatory attributes that we need to remember, mandatory attributes that are required every time. Number one is your for attribute. For attribute, I am not mentioning any value as of now. This for attribute would have something. So over here, if I'll just mark some space and arrow, this is for your label tag. Now this is for your label. This label one should always have a for attribute. It is mandatory. We need to remember this. Second is your name, or let's say ID. This is for your form element. And third one is name. These are mandatory. These are always there. Rest, other ones are as per need, but these should always be there. And this is also for your form element. So we need to have these three for sure. Remember, in any syntax, in any form element syntax, these are necessary. These need to be present. Anytime you're creating something, always make sure you put a for attribute, you put an ID attribute and name attribute. ID and name are in your this form element, and for attribute is inside your label. So if I write now syntax, my for attribute should always have, oh sorry, my label uh, tag should always have for attribute, let's say some text over here. And my form element should have two attributes, name and your ID. These are mandatory. These need to be there. The other ones like rows and columns that are coming automatically because of our VS Code intelligence, I would say, those are not necessary. Those can be removed. But for an efficient input or for an efficient form element, these need to be present. These always need to be present. So whenever you're creating any input element, any input tag, any kind of you're creating any kind of sign up form, always make sure label and your form element. So instead of input, I'll write form element over here. So let's say form element. So let me tell you now one more thing. Now form element varies. So far, I'm just writing these mandatory attributes over here. I'll just go and write some basic form elements that we have studied so far. So I'll quickly do one thing. Yeah. So what are the form elements that we have studied? One, by default, let's say by default, first, let's say input. Let's write it one by one. Input tag, right? This is one form element. So instead of form element, we can write input tag. Let's make it a single word. Form element, and let me just remove this one. So by form element, I'm writing form elements over here. So input tag, we can write input. By default, it's a text area, and that is coming from your type attribute. Type attribute, let's name over here, not mandatory ones. So let's say not mandatory. So it comes type attribute. It depends which type of input you want. By default, we have text. Type equals to text. I'm writing type attribute types. Now, if you want a password, what makes a text and password different? It hides your text. So if I put over here, look this one. It hides your text. But when we submit something, the password gets submitted in unencrypted form. So this is by default. But always remember, these are mandatory. The other ones depend on type of input you want. So it could be password. So now if you want a date picker, it could be date. If you want number input, it could be number. But if you do not put this type attribute, it would by default create an input with these attributes mentioned correctly as this one. So if I just click this one, I'm able to connect these with for and ID. And what name does, I'll just let you know. So these, remember, these we need to remember, these ones. This portion we need to remember. What? The basic syntax and these three attributes are mandatory, always. And your for attribute in a label should always match with the ID attribute in form element. And we'll just see what name does for us. So, but the answer to the question that how do we know what we need to put in as the attributes? These three are mandatory. The other one depends on the type of input you want. So like we've studied one input tag. The second that we have studied is your select tag. Select tag. Okay. Which further has your option tag, and then the same things for ID and name. The option tag has your, like we can name it as, the select tag has label, comma option, label will have same for attribute, option tag will have name and ID attribute. So we have studied text area. Text area. For every type of form element, these three are mandatory. The other ones depend on the type, like column and rows are not mandatory. Even if I put this one, like for instance, if I put this one, if I'll remove this one, my text area would be created. So right now I've not placed any label. Let's say I'll put label as, I'm not putting for, I'm not putting name. Let's say I'm writing test case. So it's not in a different div. That's why it's coming next to it. Let's reduce the size a little bit. Yeah. So this test case coming over here. Now, just see the difference. I've not put any for or ID or name. I'm not putting anything. I'll remove everything. So if I just create without the three mandatory ones, and if I submit some value, I've written some value, I've entered password, and if I submit, where is my test case? It is coming nowhere, right? It is not getting selected over here. Nothing is coming from this particular one. Nothing is coming. And that is because we have not used any name attribute. Name attribute provides the value that needs to be sent to the server. For instance, if I write now something, let's say my test case. If I hit save, go back to my form, and now if I put something, some text, and I just submit, this text case is coming. Earlier, if I'm not putting this name attribute, if I remove this one and now go back to my form and submit something, the test case would not come. See, there is no field as test case. That is coming from the name attribute. Our server is able to catch what kind of input the user has filled from the name attribute mentioned. So that is very mandatory, that if we mention, let's say, now if I mention, let's say test case, if I go back to my form, now if I hit enter, just see, there must be a field on our server page, this one, this field, it is coming. How is this coming? Only because of name attribute. So these three are mandatory. These three are very much necessary. Now, you can even miss for and ID attribute, but later on when we want to manipulate a particular input tag through JavaScript, we would need ID attribute. And to sync our label with the form element, we need for attribute. So right now, if I go here to my test case, nothing is happening. But to sync my label with this particular input tag, with this particular text area, we have two things. One is we need to mention something like for, and we need to mention something over here. And the values that we write in these two, if they match, they both would be connected together. So let's write test only. And I'll write test over here. Now just see, my name can be different. My name has nothing to do with these two. That can be different. Now if I hit save, I'm clicking on this one, this gets highlighted. Only because the for and ID attribute are matching. But my name is different. If I write something, enter the required field and submit, test case would still be submitted. So this name need not to be same. The only reason I was writing the same name because it was more consistent and easier to debug later on. We need not remember there is a name is different for a particular ID. So we usually name it the same way. So that's the reason. But
Perfect.
what all
Perfect.
attributes we need to remember are these ones. These are
Yeah.
mandatory. We need to remember these ones.
So Rahul, in the future, whenever we go for any of the topics, right? Since these attributes are necessary part for all of us to understand. So
Right.
whenever we go for a topic, then if it's like these are the tags and these are the mandatory attributes that should be or must be inside this tag, right, part of the element, and 1 2 3 we will understand it, and these are optional, not required, but these are used for, as you mentioned. In that way we will have a very clear understanding of it the way you explained it to us right now. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So over here, like this could be like rows as well, columns as well, any other attribute that you see is only as per the need of the page, as per the need of application. But if you say what is bare minimum to create a form element, a correct form element, these three are bare minimum, and you need to remember these three. For, you have to mention in label attribute, or sorry, label tag, opening tag, and the ID and name in your form element. Rest others not mandatory, and they vary from type to type. Rows and columns are only applicable to text area. They are not applicable to your select area. So these are your, we would say, global attributes for a form element. Every form element can have this one. So like you see this type attribute we have used only in input types or button types. We have not used in this select tag. If we just go over here, this one, we have not used the type. There is no type attribute. Those are only for a particular form element. So remember these three mandatory, other ones are as per the need of the particular form element or need of the application. Okay. So far we have covered very nice form elements. Just one, two I want to go through, which are trending these days. Why? Because these days we are building mobile applications first. Every company is preferring to build a mobile app first and then go to the desktop version, because number of users on mobile app are way more than the ones accessing your page on a particular desktop. So the one that we are going to now understand is your how to get phone input, how to get if you want to get a particular phone number from a user, like you're putting a registration form and you want your user to get your phone input. So Ali is facing some audio issues. Is everyone else able to hear my voice? Just give me in chat, yes, no. Perfect. So Ali, you can reconnect once again. There might be some network issues at your end. So let's see how to get phone input, how to get the phone number from a user. We'll follow the same approach, a simple div label. Okay. And now automatically it comes for attribute. I'll write the input tag. Now I don't want a text. I want phone. For that, there is an attribute called type TEL. TEL comes from your telephone. Now I'll write the bare minimum attributes, name and your ID. So over here, I'll write enter phone number. And over here, I'll write simple phone for this. ID also same, phone, and name also same. Before I hit save, now are we clear that this type is only because I want a phone number now? If I've not put this one, it would have been a simple text element. Now putting it as TEL tells the browser that this input has specifically been chosen for gathering the phone input. The for and ID are same to sync my label and input, and the name one is the name attribute is used for servers to catch the value from which particular input the user has. The user is submitting some information that is recognized by server through this name attribute. So if I hit save, you see this phone number. Now in browsers, it won't give you any different functionality. As I said, it is specifically used in mobile applications. Why? Because whenever user would click on this input, it would only get a special keypad on their phone, which is used only for your telephone numbers. There would not be any option to add generic text like your alphabets or anything else. User would get a special keypad to only put in as telephone numbers. That keypad would be designed only to give as telephone numbers. So remember, this is more used in mobile applications these days. The next one is if you want, if you suppose you are interviewing some developer and you want that developer to enter his or her portfolio website address, and your page has some input to receive that address. That is called URL input. So very simple, nothing different. Simple label. Okay. I'm not, let's write enter your website. Enter your website. So if you want to take some website information from user, if you want that your user should mention their website, simple input type should be URL. Simple. Okay, let's mention URL. You see, I'm only typing U and I'm getting recommendations from VS Code. If I type URL, now I'll mention the other bare minimum name and ID. So I'm typing URL over here, name, web address, let's say, to make sure that we understand that name and your ID should not, may or may not be same, but your for and ID attribute must be same. So we are having name as something else and for and ID attribute different. So if I hit save, I'm getting this enter your website. Now the best thing is if I enter something and if I try to submit, it would give me a browser inbuilt check that this is not URL. So let's say I try something else, .com. Okay, it's still telling me it's not a URL because your URL must have protocols, the hypertext transfer protocol. So a basic syntax is HTTP and / www dot this. Now if I submit, it would accept this particular part. It is checking for this particular part if your web address has this protocol mentioned or not. So if this is not mentioned, it would tell the user, okay, this is not a valid URL address, enter something else. So inbuilt browser checks. Okay. Now the last one, this is the last one I want to discuss, uh, a fun input element. This is a color picker. So for instance, we have a web page where we want to uh, like you have pick your favorite color. How to do that? Let's write it. Let's write same thing again, label, and I'm writing color over here. Pick your favorite color. Input, and over here, simple. I'm telling you, HTML, CSS is very self-explanatory. So in type, instead of text, we would write color. So you just try C uh, and it would give you color, simple color. And let's say name, color, ID, color. So if I hit save, automatically I'm getting this color box. So I can select any color. So these things that you see over here, we would be discussing in CSS when we would be discussing different ways of writing color, like your HSL values, hex values, RGB values. So far, we need not worry about these values. We would be studying that. But a very brief introduction that every color on your web page can be composed of 3 solid colors as per the range of 3 solid colors: red, green, and blue. So if you want black, everything goes to the maximum value, 0. Or if you go to white, they goes to the maximum value. The range is 0 to 255. So pure white, everything is 255. Pure black, everything is 0. And if you go somewhere in between, you have more of red, less of green and blue. You come over here, you have more of green, less of red and blue. So every color on web page is a mixture of these 3 colors, red, green, and blue. So if I select this one and if I write some password, so just see this color would not be submitted. There must be some value, and those values are coming from here. It could be RGB value, HSL, or hex values. Most probably these hex values, these codes are sent. This particular number is assigned to this shade of color. So every color has a different hex value, so that our browsers can understand which particular value has been received and what corresponding color it points to. So color, this value points to this shade of color, this one that you see. If I move to red, it would have different, like some pink shades or red shade. So just remember this one, 814. Let's see if we are able to see this one. Okay. You see this 814, last 3 digits we remembered. So our browser would recognize from these hex values what shade of color has been opted by the user. So these were the forms so far, form and form elements. After this long list of form elements, we have covered everything that you need to know about HTML forms. So any doubts you have before we move on to the next topic, very important topic, that is tables, how to create tables. So any doubts in this one before we move ahead? Just take 2 minutes, go through these form elements over here on the web page and see if you can put a mental picture that how to create this one, how to create name, how to create age. I'm telling you very simple. All these text boxes that you see, the syntax is same, only the type attribute is changing. Over here, this type is file, this type is color, type password, type URL, type TEL, this age, type number, type email, this type this is simple text, this is type date from date picker, and this is type checkbox, type radio. Almost this simple structure, only thing that we are changing most of the times is this type. This type would help you create different form elements over here. Remaining 3 are mandatory. You need to mention them and remember them. And for attribute, ID attribute must be same. Name attribute can differ, like in this one, this URL one, this one. Name is different, but ID and for attribute are same. And the type tells the browser what kind of input that we are providing. And this URL, this type URL creates inbuilt browser checks. So Ahmed is asking like, can you share this file? So I already shared in the last class regarding the assignments part. So we were having almost every element covered over there. Did you, were you able to check that one? So I shared two form elements and it had almost everything. So this one, and regarding code, if you need this one, I'll definitely share this one. This code part, if you need, I'll definitely share this one. Okay. So are we clear with this one? Any doubts? Any doubts? So that before moving ahead, we know how to create a form. So let's have a very quick recap if we want. Let's say I'll just move over here. Okay. So every form element, whenever we want to create a form, it begins with form tag. Very quick recap. Now this form must have a mandatory attribute that is action. Now, what is this action? Action is the address of the server. Where do we want to send this form? And next is method. Method can be get, can be post. But if we are dealing with the web browsers, the method should always be get. But if we are dealing with the server, if we are coding for a server, the method would be post. So I'll just write some like get over here and let's say server URL address. In our case, I created a separate file and mentioned that address. Let me show you this one. I created a submitted information that this file, if I just write this one and submit, just see this file. I'll increase the size. This submitted information HTML is already over here in this one. So my form is getting pointed to this one. This is a very temporary server, that kind of thing we created just to see what kind of values we are getting. So everything inside form would be a form element. Basic syntax, every form element would have a label and an input tag or form element. It could be input. Let me write other ones. It could be your select. It could be your text area. And let's remove this one. And it could be your button as well. Yeah. So far we have started this one, right? So this is basic syntax. Every input or every form element would have a label. So we would have a label for select area. We would have a label for text area. And for button, whatever we mention inside over here, that would be the label. So if we write login over here, and if I hit save, you see this login text is coming from here. So I've not mentioned any, let's say, general label. You see this general label, it is not pointing to anything else, just a formal syntax. Simple label, input. This is normal text input as of now. If I remove this one, even this type attribute from here, still by default, it would be a text input. Now this select option, nothing put inside. Inside this select, how do we write? Simple, another label and an option tag. Option tag over here. We can have it like this. Or we can skip this part also. We need not have label. We can write something like this. Let's say test. So we're getting this option, right? This one. The text inside is pointing to this one. We can have multiple options over here. Let's say second option. So if I just go down, I'm getting this drop down menu. Now, if I change type, it could be radio. Let's say I'll just mark few type. Now, if you want, you just see, you're getting so many options for your type attribute. We have studied only few out of these, the major ones. So let's go one by one. We understand button, right? Type button would be a simple button. Type checkbox, if you want to select multiple options. Type color would be a color picker. Type date, you have this date picker over here, this one. Now date time, you have multiple options in date time as well. If you want to have date and time, if you want to have date time and local time, now type email, this one, this second one. File, if you want to choose a file, upload a file. Now this hidden, it is used for JavaScript manipulation. We're not touching this one as of now. Now type image if you want to put an image on the page through input tag. Now month, number, month if you want to select a month. So like over here, we are selecting a date. If you select month, only month would be there. Let me show you. So let's see if we have, where do we have this one? Did we get, okay, we have multiple. Yeah, over here, this one. Just see, I'm getting only months. The other ones are coming from this empty text inputs. This one, only month. If you want to have month in your form. So moving ahead, we remember number, this age one, increment, decrement, password. If you want to hide the text user is putting, radio, this one. Now range, you must have seen some slider bars being used, range. You want to select a range from 0 to 100. Reset button, we have seen this one, reset button. Submit simple, TEL, telephone number, we just saw this one, enter your phone number. And text, simple text. So I'll just remove these ones. So very easy to put once you understand the general syntax. Every input or every form element should have a label and 3 basic attributes, name, ID, and form. Rest depends on type of form element you want. And everything that comes inside the form tag is called the form element. And we begin form tag with the action and the method attribute. Now, if you're sending a file, we studied another attribute called enc type. If you want to send a file in multiple parts, a simple file. So any doubt so far, anything you want me to explain again before we move ahead, just put it in chat, or you can ask by unmuting yourself as well. Just should we move ahead to our next topic? Okay. So next one is tables, where we have 15 minutes. I'll just cover the brief overview of how a table looks, how a table can be designed on a web page. So let's minimize this one. We have this HTML tables already open, and I've created a file, a simple tables file, this one tables.html, and this particular web page is rendered from this one. We understand how to render a web page, right? A simple web page. I'll just word wrap this. Yeah. So if over here, you can see on which port your file is running. So if you want to check the port, you see this one, this 5500. You can see same port is coming from here. And this is the path. How we can check in my folder section, there is a tables folder, and inside folder, there is table.html. We started this in relative paths. And this is the, this one is the address of server. Over here, this is the local server. Globally, everywhere you would see 127.0.0.1 as the local server. So now let's move ahead. Let's see how tables look and what do they represent. Now, when you're building a project that needs to represent a data visually, you want a good way to display the information, which is easy to read, easy to understand. Now, depending on types of data, we select different representations. Like for form, we have different form elements. In most of the cases, the structured data is put in tables. When we want to use rows and columns, like you've seen Excel sheets, in your Excel spreadsheet, you have number of rows and number of columns. That is called a table. Now, tables are used for providing information like menu cards, price lists, your invoices, mark sheets, timetables. Let me show you an image of a table. I have this. Yeah, this. You see, okay. Sorry. Just see over here that representation of data in form of rows and columns like an Excel spreadsheet is called a table. With the help of table, you can arrange data like images in a particular cell, links in a particular cell, and information in a particular rows and columns. So if we focus over here, this is a very broad table body in which we have number of rows, this as row 1, this as row 2, and each row has 3 columns, 1, 2, and 3. And the intersection of row and column is called one cell. Each cell holds the information. So whenever you put some data in Excel sheet, you put some data inside this cell. So these cells hold your data information, right? Now tables in everywhere, tables are enclosed using rows and columns. In HTML, there are 3 mandatory tags. Like we studied in forms, there are 3 mandatory tags that are used to create a table. Let me show you how to create one. So I'll quickly minimize this one. So let's come to our HTML tables VS Code editor. Now, how do we do it? To create a form, we used form tag. For tables, we used table tag. It's very self-explanatory. Now, each row is defined by a tr tag. This tr tag. Now, table tag, I'm just going one by one. Table tag tells the browser that it contains a table inside. That the user is accessing a table, that the developer has created a table. With this tag, the browser knows, okay, I'm having a table on my web page. Now tr calls table row. It defines a single row, and each row has different cells, right? Now let's put some cells over here. So if we write to represent cell, we have a tag called td, that is table data. So remember these 3 tags I'm talking. These are mandatory tags. Your table, it's a wrapper tag in which each row would be placed, and in each row, number of cells would be represented. This TD, table data, represents one cell. Whatever we put inside this table data would be shown on our page. We can put text, picture, list, buttons, even other tables like nesting would happen. For instance, let me write something over here to show you. Okay, let's say I write cell 1. If I hit save, okay, I think we should run it once again, because I'll close the previous one so that automatically it happens. Now this cell 1 is coming from here. You see, this is one cell. Now if I write another cell, this is cell 2. Just see, this is cell 1 and cell 2. Right now, no border, nothing being shown over here. But in tables, we can write an attribute called border attribute, and we mention some value. That is number value 1, 2, 3, and so on. If I mention 1, it would create a very fine border. Just see this one, demarcating each cell and a table body. So if we come back to our previous picture, we would see this one. This is a table body. Now my table has a single row. Remember, I have one row, but with 2 cells. The cells are represented with TD tags, TD called table data. Anything that I put inside this, I can put anything inside. Let me show you an example. We remember anchor tag. Let's say I'll mark it as anchor tag. Okay, let's go back. And let's say I want to go to Google homepage. I want to create a link over here. Google homepage. Now, what was the attribute? href attribute. Remember href attribute? How to, we need to put the address. PS, let's say google.com. Let's see if it does work. You see, this link is placed. Now, if I click over here, I would be taken to Google page. So idea I'm trying to give over here is that we can put anything inside these cells, anything, an image, text, lists, or another tables. We would be seeing multiple examples, but right now just understand we can put anything. I'm removing this anchor tag and I'm just mentioning cell 2. To make us understand, we have one row with two cells. One row with two cells. Over here, we have three cells with two rows. Now to create another row inside the table, what is the tag? TR. This would create another row. First row has two cells. Let's create another one to replicate the image. Let's say cell 3. So just see. Right now, this TR tag has not been rendered because there is no information inside it. If I write another one, let's say TD, and I'll just copy this one and I'll mention cell 4 and I'll save this one. Yes, see, I can have empty cells as well with no data inside them. For instance, on a page, you want to create some empty space use inside a table, you can do it without any information being over there. So if I write cell 4 or cell 5, it would be there. Similarly, cell 6. So now our table has two rows, tr tag 1 and tr tag 2. Inside rows, we have the data cells that is represented by td. And any information inside this td tags is called your data. That is your data. Right now, simple text. Otherwise, it could be anything. So a very brief understanding. Now, if we see this information on a picture, how would it look? It would look something like this. Just see this table tag and your number of rows and then your number of cells. Over here, we have 4 rows with 3 cells. Now, how can we count number of columns? The number of cells in a row become the number of columns. Like 1, 2, 3. We have 3 columns and 4 rows. So we might have studied metrics or matrices in our uh, school at some point of time. That is 4 cross 3 matrix or 3 cross 3 matrices 3 by 3. So it is number of rows into number of columns. We have 4 rows, 3 columns over here. And how are we counting number of columns? By number of cells in a row. This is one table. So if you say, if I want to create uneven table, it is possible, but it won't look good. So we can write cell 7. It would take extra space over here. Just see. So this space is not assigned to first row, but our cell 7 has been added. We can have uneven tables as well at any point of time if we need that there must be some extra column or extra space added. Now it's not an even matrix. Earlier, it was 2 rows and 3 columns. Now we cannot call it in that way. We can say, okay, our first row has 3 columns. Our second row has 4 columns. This is an uneven matrix, uneven table. So we can have that. So let me get rid of this one as of now. So this table, if we want to create this table, how to do it? How many cells do we have? 3 in each column. Oh, sorry, in each row. We are going perfectly fine, right? Now, how many rows do we need to have? We need to have 4 rows. How to do it? Let's recreate this table. We have created row 1. Let's mark it over here. Row 1. And let's come over here. Row 2. Now for third row, we need to follow same syntax. Row 3. How do we do it? First is your tr tag that would tell, okay, I want another row. Inside this, I would write the cell. How to write a cell? With td tag. Td tag creates a space. So let's write cell 7. So now we have created a space. I'll copy this one. I'll mark it as 8 and I'll mark it as 9. We have this. Similarly, if I want to have another row 4. How can we do it? Simple. TR tag to initiate a row, TD tag to initiate one cell. And inside it, we would write the information that we want to display on our table. Cell 11, and similarly, cell, oh sorry, TD tag, cell 12. So now, just see. We have 12 cells in our table. Each row has 3 cells. So 3 cells and number of rows are 4. So 12 cells. This is how we are creating a table. A very simple way of creating one table. Now, if you want to see this syntax side by side, I have that image as well. So let's see. So this one, simple, the one that we created. First row, this one, 1, 2, 3. Second row, this one, 4, 5, 6. So any doubts in this one, how to create a row, how to create a cell, and everything should be inside your table tag. This is your wrapper tag, this table. This tells the browser, okay, I have some table information, tabular information on my page. So it reads it and displays it as per the set standards. With every TR tag, it knows, okay, I have to create another row, another row, another row. With every TD opening and closing, it knows, okay, this information must be contained within these boundaries. So if I just add something, let's say cell 4 is very important. So my size would automatically get adjusted. Just focus on this cell 4. Automatically, it would increase the size of entire column. So if I hit save, the entire column gets, because I need to make sure I recognize what one column is. One column has these cells, so it automatically adjusts this. And by default, the text in these are aligned to the left. So we would be studying different elements, the other important tags of a table as well. Right now, 3 mandatory tags we studied. Table tag, this one, your TR tag, and your TD tag. These are 3 mandatory to create a table. Without these 3, you cannot create a table like this on HTML. So very basic thing. So any questions regarding this one? How to create a table, what each tag represents, and so on. Okay. So let's have a nice another table that would represent row and column number. So now we know that this is row 1, column 1, row 1, column 2. So let's have another table. Let me write another table, a quick representation. Let's give it a border. The border attribute, it only demarcates each cell and each table separately. However, you see this is being read because in HTML, we are not using it anymore. We are providing styling to our tables through CSS. But these were earlier used in earlier versions of HTML, which are still applicable if you want to try something instantly on your page. So let's say border, I mark it as 1. And in this, I want to create 2 rows. Sorry. And I'm creating my 2 rows right now only. And each row should have 2 cells. Let's say each row have 2 cells. So if I hit save, I'm getting a very small table over here. You see, there is no content, nothing being provided. That's why it's just a simple box with 4 cells. Moment I write some content inside it, it would provide the size to cell as per the content mentioned inside. So this is my let's say row 1 and column. Okay, column 1. So if I hit save, I'm getting this simple, nothing. It right now, even these cells have no content. That's why it's showing nothing. So let's write, this is my row 1. I'll just write it first. Column, oh sorry, row 2. This is my second row, right? Second row and column 1. And similarly, if we have this is from my row 1. column 2, and I'll just paste and make it row 2. So over here, okay, let's add a line over here to make it more clear. Okay. Yeah. So just see, this is first row and second row. Focus on this one. First row and second row. First cell belongs to my row 1, column 1. Row 1, column 1. Second cell belongs to my row 1, column 2, second column. This cell is second row, but first column. This cell, second row, second column. So if you want to target a particular cell inside your table, it's easier for you to understand, okay, which row, which column I need to target on. You can provide an ID to particular table cell and style that particular cell separately. These are different ways that we would be doing right now. What we need to understand, 3 basic tags, important tags, and what they mean. So, any questions from today's lecture? Table, TR your row, and TD your cell tag. That helps you put some text or any information. It could be an element, it could be an image, it could be a link. We just saw an example of Google homepage link. So we can put anything. We would be seeing that in next sessions, how to put different elements inside cell. But as of now, just make sure you understand how to create this basic table, this one. So I would request everyone to just create this table, these 2 tables today. Just try to create these 2 tables where you have these 12 cells with each row having 3 cells and this information. Okay, which row and which column each cell belong to. First cell belong to row 1, column 1. Second cell belong to row 1, column 2, and so on. So try to make these tables. Okay. So any questions? We have 5 minutes. We'll take 5 minutes. Some questions on the chat. If you have any questions, just put them on chat.
Ali, do you have any questions?
No, Talash, for now. I don't have any questions.
Okay, perfect. If no questions, then we will wrap it up here. And